Today's topic that I'm going to cover is preparing the workforce to harness artificial intelligence by Tim Ringo. Hello there, I'm Tim Ringo, former Accenture, IBM, and SAP senior executive. These days I'm an author, board advisor, and conference speaker on all subjects related to how do we align people to new technologies to create, first of all, better engagement, second, higher performance and productivity, which is the subject of my 2020 book, Solving the Productivity Puzzle. My latest book is called Revelation, which is all about how do we harness AI in the workplace. So it's building on that subject of solving the productivity puzzle because AI, I believe, is going to be one of the best and probably one of the most historic uplifts in people's productivity going forward. But let me outline to you today my thoughts on that and how I see that going forward. First of all, the age of AI would not be possible without this word, without this term, Yottabyte. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Yottabyte. I haven't run into too many people who have, but that's okay. I'm going to explain what it is today. But the bottom line is we wouldn't have AI today without this. So a Yottabyte, what is it? Well, it's an impossibly large number. It's 1 followed by 27 zeros, or a septillion, or to bring it into even closer terms, it's 1 trillion trillion. So a number that's almost impossible for humans to get their head around. And if you look at the bottom here, the prefixes that align to that in terms of bytes of data, right? So bytes of data are those things that we create and process and that fly around the internet every day. And you can remember the old days of kilobytes and megabytes and gigabytes. Well, these days we're all the way up to something called a yottabyte. And that word didn't even exist 5 years ago. It was a word that had to be invented to show the size of data and the level of processing capability that we have these days. And without this level of processing, AI would be virtually impossible. So AI is powered by machines that can process data at this size. And this is really where we're headed. In fact, the yottabyte is going to be replaced very soon by what will have to be a new term, which is when we add 3 more zeros to this number. So keep that in mind. That's what you're in today, the yottabyte, and then we don't know what the next era is going to be called quite yet. But let's look at AI. So, I tend to look at everything in the context of people performance and engaging people in their work so they get more out of their work, but also that the organization gets more as well. So the upside of AI on people productivity, in my opinion, is massive, right? And don't take my word for it. The really smart folks at Goldman Sachs also agree, and they believe that AI could contribute up to 1.5% to annual productivity growth over a 10-year period, right? And this translates into something like 7 trillion in extra GDP every year. That is a massive uplift. Although it seems like a small number, 1.5% improvement in productivity growth translates into vast wealth creation. And many people believe that the upside, that even greater, could be up to 2.9 total uplift, which means it's more than double that. So you're looking at 15 trillion added to GDP. And we're going to come on to why GDP is really important in a moment. So even before COVID, we were sleepwalking into a workplace and workforce crisis. For 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, we've seen the average annual rate of GDP growth start to have downward pressure on that. And in fact, the OECD is predicting from 2020 out to 2060, so a sort of 40-year time frame, that we're going to see downward pressure on GDP growth. In fact, we'll see it on average going down for the next 40 years. And the reason they say this is really simple. There's 3 things. One, we're not investing enough in aligning people to technology, right? So the subject that I like to talk about. Second, we're not changing our organization structures to take advantage of digital technology. And lastly, we're not transforming our processes to take advantage of digital technology. Now, I call that the pessimist point of view because basically they're saying that's the way it is and that's the way it's going to be out until 2060. When I see that organizations are actually working on all 3 of these things at the moment, and I think AI is going to plug into that, and I think it's going to not only plug that gap, it's going to actually create a graph that's going to show that average annual GDP growth, I think, will go up over the next 40 years. So let me see if I can convince you. First of all, the OECD are absolutely right. We go through these periods of what's called the productivity paradox, where new technology inflections come along, and then people have to race to keep up with it, right? And we've seen this going all the way back 300 years, right? All the way back to even before the Industrial Revolution, when some new technology like the steam engine comes along, or the cotton gin, or those types of things, we've seen people initially get disrupted, lose their jobs, but then they go on to find better jobs, creating more value. And we call this the productivity paradox, where technology actually reduces productivity initially, but eventually people catch up and we see greater productivity than before. And we go through these periods quite often, but unfortunately, the past 10 years, we've had an elongated period where the productivity paradox has been impacting our productivity. That's why the OECD are concerned. And one thing you can't do, right, is just work harder. In fact, data is coming in from Deloitte's and McKinsey's, lots of smart people, showing that just throwing more people and hours at the problem of productivity has actually made it worse. That what we want to do is start working smarter, right? It looks like, according to the data, that the best kind of work week is somewhere around 34 hours when we augment people with technology, working 34 hours a week, which suggests a 4-day week. When we augment them with technology like AI, we can actually produce more productivity. But just trying to go from a 34-hour week to a 68-hour week actually brings productivity down. So it's kind of a situation of diminishing returns. So how do we solve that? Well, AI could be to the rescue. I'm certainly a strong believer. In my 2020 book, which I wrote in 2018, I talked about how I thought AI was going to come to our rescue, that it was going to be one of those things that was going to solve the productivity puzzle. But I think it's important to understand exactly what we're talking about when we talk about AI. There's 4 different areas: reactive, limited memory, theory of mind, and self-aware. But these days in the workplace, we're really only talking about 2 areas of AI: reactive, so spam filters, chatbots, things that have been around for quite a long time now, 20 years really, to what's been emerging now, which is limited memory AI, which is generative AI. So that's what ChatGPT is. It's what self-driving cars, as they start to appear, is. It's what virtual assistants, like your Amazon Alexa. And that's kind of where we are today, and it's called narrow AI. But it's enough for us now, right? There's some others that are coming we don't have time to talk about today, but it's really these 2 that I think are going to be driving productivity much higher in the future. So we're only focused on these 2 right now, which is called narrow AI. But let's take a snapshot of this. I mean, you would be, sort of forgiven for thinking that AI is everywhere, right? That everybody's using ChatGPT. Well, it's not the case. In fact, ChatGPT's user base is right around 200 million people globally, which is a small fraction of the 9 billion people on the planet. So if you think about it, we're still at early days, we're still early adopters. So when you compare that against social media, where we have 3 billion to 4 billion people on social media, we're at the very early days of adoption of ChatGPT. So don't worry, you have time to learn how to use AI. That's a key thing to know. But the market impact of ChatGPT has been huge. It's estimated that their market value is somewhere between 1 to 4 billion in only a couple of years. It's quite astonishing. But what's interesting is nearly 15% of ChatGPT's users are based in the US, with India and then UK, Australia, France following, and Canada following close behind. So the distribution in terms of countries is also very narrow. But engagement is growing, and it is something that people are picking up quicker, and we're going to see it expand faster, very much faster than social media did. So you have time, but not a lot of time, to start using AI and start to use it to improve your productivity. And in fact, this is from the WEF. This is a fantastic report. I highly recommend you go look this up. It came out in December 2023. And it's the World Economic Forum's Future Skills Report. And there's loads of information there, but this is a relevant chart here. It kind of shows you what's going on at the moment, right? And what Goldman Sachs says, what makes AI so revolutionary is not the technology itself, but the rate at which it will transform the workplace. And we're starting to see it in terms of job growth, right? So the top 10 fastest growing jobs at the end of 2023 was, not surprisingly, AI and machine learning specialists, sustainability specialists, business intelligence analysts, fintech, data analysts, all these kind of scientific roles that are going to be needed in order to use AI to transform the workplace. But those that are starting to decline are things like bank tellers, postal service clerks, cashiers clerks, data entry clerks. These are starting to go away as we replace these rather low value add jobs with AI and then move these people on to more value added types of work. So for instance, if you go into McDonald's these days, they've got the kiosks where you can order your meal. that doesn't mean they've got rid of people that take your order. They've actually shifted these people to do other customer service type roles. So McDonald's has actually increased their workforce over the past couple of years using these types of tools. So it's a good news story, not necessarily a bad news story about replacing people. And I'll get on to that in a minute. So the machines are coming, look busy, but I don't want you to think that there's somehow a danger or they're going to take your job or they're going to suddenly become your supervisor. That isn't where narrow AI is today, and won't be, in my opinion, for the next 20 years or so. In fact, the real danger of AI is where people don't have the skills and capabilities and confidence to harness the AI, to take the fullest advantage of it for their job, to take them and sort of supercharge them in their job, or even move into a new job that's more interesting for them and they can create even more value. So the real danger is not being replaced or the technology turning on us. It's our ability to absorb it and start to use it. And so, AI, and specifically generative AI, is really only as good as the workforce's ability to ask it the right question and then interpret the results. These are the two key skills that people are going to need going forward. This is where I think the real danger is right now, in that we're kind of racing ahead and people are starting to play with the technology. But what we need to do is take a step back and teach ourselves how to ask it the right question and then interpret the results correctly. Because when we do that, and I don't know if you've had a chance to play with it, but certainly when I've learned to sort of ask it the right questions, I get better information back. And I also get better at saying, hang on, is that right or not? And maybe asking it a slightly different question. So this is where we need to be. This is the first real key skill. So the real question is, how do we get the workplace and the workforce ready to make the best use of AI? Not how we replace people, but how we augment them, right? And so the goal is moving from where we are today, which is kind of an awareness and a bit of playing with it, to a readiness and confidence to use it. And ultimately, the realization is these first two skills, which is learning how to ask it the right questions and then interpret the results. That is our first step in terms of harnessing AI. And I think all organizations should be starting there and creating learning programs and motivation programs to get people onto AI, to be able to move from awareness and ultimately starting to use it to help them in their jobs. But it's really important that we understand something. And I love this quote by Dr. Khani from Harvard Business School, which is, AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI are going to replace humans without AI, right? Without AI, sorry. And this is where it's really important. So that's why you shouldn't be worried about losing your job. What you should be worrying about is, how are you going to use it to augment you at work and make you irreplaceable? Because if you don't, people with AI are going to replace you. The AI won't. And we've been here before. I mean, really, if you go back to 1999 when the internet was first coming into work and it was starting to be commercialized and all these things, it was very similar sorts of things. People were saying this is going to be transformative. The internet is going to be the way forward, both for consumers and also for us in work. And in fact, at the time, I was working at BT when BT announced that they weren't going to be a telephone company anymore. They were going to be an internet digital company. And it was very interesting because the workforce, when we surveyed them, only 90% of them could say that they even knew what the internet was, right? And 10% had actually been on the internet. So they were going to become a digital company with only 10% of their workforce who had actually experimented with the internet. So what did we do? We created a program to get people on the internet to learn about the internet. So we created learning programs for BT's intranet, and people learned how they were going to use it at work. They learned how they were going to use it with customers. And I think we're at that same point now at 2024. 25 years later, it's the same inflection point. We now have to realize that we're now in this different era, the Yottabyte era, the AI era, where we've got this new tool that's going to create all this fantastic productivity, but only if we start to move into playing with it and trying it out. In fact, one of the things I've been recommending to my clients is, if you want to get your workforce to start to learn about it, ask them to book a holiday using AI, using ChatGPT or Claude or some of these other tools. And that's exactly what we did at BT back then. We said, look, go on the internet and book a holiday, which is one of the first things you could do back in 1999, believe it or not. But this is important, that we're going back to the future, where we need to sort of look at how we adopted the internet and use those same approaches in change management and motivating people to start to adopt AI. It's an interesting situation, but we're at that inflection point again, where we're going to hopefully see technology doesn't race ahead of us, because we're going to teach people how to use it. So I want to say thank you very much. And if you ever want to get a hold of me and learn more about my new book, Revelation, you can zap this QR code. It'll take you to my website. And there'll be information on there about how you find me on LinkedIn. Or you can email me at tim@timringo.com if you'd like more information about my workshops or my speeches on the subject of AI in the workplace. Thank you very much.